All right, Shalom. First and foremost, call Halal Yamla, Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Harachakwadash. Double honors to the apostles, bishops, and elders, a great millstone from whom I learned the truth from. And also peace and salutations to the hopeful elect of the nation of Israel, scattered throughout the four corners of the earth. And the title of this video is going to be Prepping in Bunkers Will Not Save During World War III. Okay. And I'm going to be going into another article from the Newsbreak app. And the source of this article, as you see here on the screen, is from the U.S. Sun. And as you see, the title of the article says, Doomsday Prepper Reveals $430,000 Personal Bunker for World War III Protection and Steps You Can Take to Start Stockpiling. Okay. And so it says, a doomsday prepper who has a personal bunker with goods worth $430,000 has shared an urgent warning as tensions rise from global conflicts. Okay, and then that's her picture right here. Okay, of the the individual, a woman. Looks like she could be either Edomite or if she's a Jake, then she probably maybe of the northern tribe or who knows. But it continues to say Rowan McKenzie, which is the the woman that you see pictured at the bottom of the screen. Okay, Rowan McKenzie is well known for her expert advice in preparing for any disaster, including the end of the world. Okay. And it pretty much shows, there you see, her picture again, and there you see right here, this is her, her bunker right here, showing the, the items, the food items and the resources that she has in her bunker. Okay. And it shows even more pictures of things that she has in her bunker. Okay. Then it continues to say, jumping down in the article, it says, following escalating strikes between Iran and Israel, the 40-year-old is sharing what she believes to be crucial advice for anyone worried about possible gray zone attacks. Okay, so basically, as a matter of fact, I'll continue reading. Rowan has admitted that she is concerned that World War III is just around the corner, so it's preparing how she sees fit. Hey, pretty much, over this, these past few days, ever since, the Israel-Iran, exchange has been happening. Okay, where Israel and Iran have been basically exchanging rocket attacks upon each other over these past few days. You've been pretty much see a spirit throughout the whole entire earth that that we're pretty much on the brink of World War III. Okay, and we know, according to prophecy as well, that when tensions between Israel and Iran would finally pop off, as we see right now. That would indeed, according to Bible prophecy, spark off World War III. Okay, it will eventually lead to the least of the flock, the small hats of the current state of Israel, drawing out, Babylon the Great and these other major superpowers around the world into World War III. Russia, China, North Korea, so on and so forth. Okay, and pretty much looking at, what's going on between Israel and Iran right now, it's pretty much no turning back at this point. There's no turning back according to prophecy, of course. Okay. And, you best believe, okay, these small hats aren't looking for any type of ceasefire with Iran. Okay. Because, if you've been, paying attention for about the past 10 to 15 years or so, those small hats over there in Israel have been planning for a war against Iran. Okay, with the support of the United States. Okay, and so we pretty much, as we see right now, Israel and Iran is finally exchanging rockets and missiles and whatnot back and forth. Is at the point of no return. We're at the end. Okay, World War III is pretty much here, and even this woman, okay, this woman right here, even feels it, as well as the whole entire world. Okay, and pretty much as this article is going into, she basically stockpiled over $400,000 of food and resources within her personal bunker, preparing for the end times, okay, the end of the world as she called it, as well as World War III. All right, and we the hopeful elect, we know according to the scriptures that bunkers and so-called prepping and things like that will not get the victory over these end times, Jacob's trouble, okay, as well as World War III. Let's get this is the book of Job, chapter 8 and verse 15. It says, he shall lean upon his house, but it shall not stand. He shall hold it fast, but it shall not endure. Okay, and let's read that in the NLT. Job 8 verse 15 in the NLT, it says, they cling to their home for security, but it won't last. They try to hold it tight, but it will not endure. And you see, any little underground bunker that's here in Babylon the Great America, okay, when those missiles get shot off on this place, okay, when the Lord Yahweh Shai puts his spirit on these nations around the world, including America's European allies, to shoot off their nuclear missiles and their nuclear arsenal and their hypersonic missiles upon Babylon the Great America, okay, nothing is going to survive in this place except for the elect. Okay, no tree, no blade of grass, no river, no body of water, okay, no house, no skyscraper, no underground bunker. None of these things are going to endure and survive the judgment of Yahweh Shai, okay, that's getting ready to come upon this place by way of nuclear fire, as well as the fire from the chariots of Yahweh Shai and the holy angels. Okay, they cling to their home for security, but it won't last. They try to hold it tight, but it will not endure. Yeah, and then people like that woman that we were just reading about, okay, she's going to cling to her underground bunker and all the 400,000 plus dollars of food and resources that she's put in that bunker. She's going to cling to all those things for security, okay, but it's not going to last. It's not going to endure the Lord's judgment that he's getting ready to bring upon this place. All right, because even when we go into further into the scriptures in Amos the 9th chapter, it even speaks about how these elites have these underground bunkers that they're going to be fleeing into to try to escape the Lord's judgment. All right, but it's going to fail. This is Amos chapter 9. I'm going to start from verse 1. Look at the subheading at the top of the screen. God's judgment unavoidable. Okay, Amos chapter 9 verse 1. I saw the Lord Yahweh standing upon the altar, and he said, smite the lintel of the door, that the posts may shake, and cut them in the head, all of them, and I will slay the last of them with the sword. He that fleeth of them shall not flee away, and he that escapeth of them shall not be delivered. All right, verse 2. Though they dig into hell, thence shall mine hand take them. Okay, though they dig into hell meaning the ground, the earth. Okay, and how are these elites, these billionaires and these trillionaires and whatnot, all throughout, all around the world, okay, and even here in Babylon the Great America, how are they digging into hell, into the earth, and by way of these underground bunkers, these underground facilities. Okay, and as a matter of fact, I believe even just some months ago, you had articles, circulated okay, around the internet, in amongst, the brothers and whatnot, where, you had articles coming out, where it was saying basically, a lot of millionaires across Babylon and Great America were investing in underground bunkers and underground facilities and whatnot, okay? And ultimately, why are they doing that? Because they know that something big is getting ready to happen. They know that something catastrophic is getting ready to come to America, Babylon the Great. Okay, it ultimately is ultimately is what? Nuclear destruction, nuclear missiles. Okay, and so as we see right here in prophecy again, Amos 9 verse 2, though they dig into hell, the earth, okay, under the ground, then shall my hand take them. Okay, and ultimately, what is that talking about when it says, then shall my hand take them? Ultimately going into, Yahweh Shai and us the hopeful elect. Okay, after the destruction, after the deliverance, after we receive those new bodies, are gonna be pretty much going down into these underground bunkers and grabbing the elites out of those bunkers and bringing them into captivity as our first fruit slaves, okay, in the kingdom of heaven. And it says, though they climb up to heaven, thence will I bring them down. And what is that going into? Not only do these millionaires and billionaires have underground bunkers to try to escape the Lord's judgment, but they also have, particular space stations up there in the second heavens to try to escape the Lord's judgment as well. That's why, over these past few years, we, seen talks of guys like Jeff Bezos, okay, bring, linking up with the billionaires and flying up, so-called flying up to the moon, okay. Even had guys, but like Elon Musk over recent years talking about going to Mars and things like that. You gotta ask yourself, why these multi-millionaires and billionaires and trillionaires and whatnot, why are they, always, every now and then talking about going out in space, trying to set up a habitation in space, dwelling on the moon and dwelling on Mars and whatnot, okay? Because they're trying to look for, habitats out there in the second heaven, okay, out there in space, to avoid judgment by the Lord, to escape the Lord's judgment. But as we just read, though they climb up to heaven, thence will I bring them down. The Lord's go bring down their space stations and and all these vehicles that these multi-millionaires and billionaires are flying up to the heavens to escape the Lord's judgment. Okay. But like it read again, though they dig into hell, into the earth, by way of these underground bunkers, then shall my hand take them. Basically, these underground bunkers aren't going to help any of these elites or anybody in general, escape the Lord's judgment. All right. Let's go back to that article. Okay. Doomsday Prepper reveals $430,000 personal bunker for World War III protection and steps you can take to start stockpiling. And what's funny is after I kind of read into the article, I was going into reading some of the comments. Okay. As you see this comment right here from Laurie Joe Thane from Willows, California. It says, true preppers don't give out their names. Why, you ask? Because all your quote unquote neighbors now know what you have. Not a smart move. Real preppers stay incognito and don't brag about what they have for obviously obvious reasons. All right. Then I also saw a couple more comments. Let's see. All right, then you have this comment right here from this individual with the handle called your mama. Okay, but it says if it comes down to that, he with the most ammo wins. Okay, he with the most ammo wins. You know, and you could just use your imagination as to what this individual is alluding to. Okay, let me see. I think it might have been a couple more I saw as well. Yeah, and then you have this one right here from an individual named Anthony from Orchard Park, New York. It says, her bunker will be the first place people go and loot when the end starts. LOL. Okay? And these few comments that I just read in the comment section of this article, what does that all speak to? Okay? Let's go to second Ezra's the 15th chapter. All right? Second Ezra's the 15th chapter. Because that's true. When you're, if you're putting it out all on the internet that you have an underground bunker and you have, hundreds of thousands of food and resources stashed up in your bunker, then you basically gonna make yourself a target. When all hell breaks loose. Okay, and Second Ezra's the 15th chapter speaks of that. All right, Second Ezra's 15 and let's start at 14. It says, woe to the world and them that dwell therein, for the sword and their destruction draweth nigh. One people shall stand up and fight against another, and swords in their hands. And what's the modern day sword? The gun, ammunition, as that one comment had alluded to. He who has the most ammo, like that one comment we just read. Okay, in this 15th verse right here. What does that speak to? Civil unrest, okay, anarchy, every man for himself type of environment. And then of course in the 16th verse it goes into, for there shall be sedition among men and invading one another. Okay, they shall not regard their kings. They shall not regard their kings nor princes, and the course of their actions shall stand in their power. And of course that's going into what? These citizens ultimately rebelling against their government, rebelling against the president, rebelling against their political leaders, their state leaders, senators, and whatnot. All right, and that's brewing up more and more here in Babylon the Great. Okay, you just had to, I believe, two Republican politicians up there in the state of Minnesota, if I'm not mistaken. Just a few days ago, pretty much got deleted from an individual over, what the police believe up there to be political motives. Okay, so that's showing you what? That these people here in Babylon the Great America are getting sick and tired of their politicians and their governors and their political leaders, and it's getting ready to be uproars against the government. Okay, in sedition in this place, civil war. But it continues to say, verse 17, a man shall desire to go into a city and shall not be able to. Okay, and why is that? Because, when all hell breaks loose, it's going to get so bad to where, the government is going to have to issue martial law, all right, along with curfews, okay, and and lock down the cities. Okay, you won't be able to go in and out the city, like you used to. Okay, these cities are going to be locked down due to so much chaos going on. All right, and it says, verse 18, for because of their pride the cities shall be troubled, the houses shall be destroyed, and men shall be afraid. Because that's how bad it's getting ready to get in these end times, going into Jacob's trouble. That even men, mighty men, okay, strong men are going to be afraid in that day. So how much more these women? Like that woman that we were just reading about in that article. Okay, and then verse 19. Here's the point: a man shall have no pity upon his neighbor, but shall destroy their houses with the sword, and spoil their goods, because of the lack of bread, meaning what? The lack of food, and for great tribulation. You see that? And you best believe, that woman that we just, read about in that article with her bunker, okay? That you best believe, that's most definitely going to befall upon her and many other, women and people in general like her. That's, have, these underground bunkers with all this food and resources stashed in their bunkers, thinking they're in good case. Okay, and like this comment read again from this individual Anthony from Orchard Park, New York. He says her bunker will be the first place people go and loot when the end starts. LOL. And we clearly just read that in prophecy in 2nd Ezra 15 verse 19. Okay. All right. So let's get some more scriptures. All right. Let's get this. This is Proverbs chapter 13, verse 22. It says, "A good man leaveth an inheritance to his children's children, and the wealth of the sinner is laid up for the just." Okay, and the wealth of a lot of these people, that have these underground bunkers with all kinds of food and resources, stashed up in it. Especially the woman that again we just read in that article, where she had over $400,000 of food and resources stashed in her underground bunker. Okay, which if you have over $400,000, to stash, resources and essential goods within a bunker, okay, and ultimately if you just have $400,000 to spend on anything overall, then you're wealthy. You're a wealthy person. Okay, but guess what? That woman's wealth, along with the wealth of a lot of these other people in this country, that have secret underground bunkers, stashing food and resources. Hey, a lot of that is going to be laid up. The Lord's going to have all these things ultimately laid up for the elect. Okay, for the elect to have access to all that food and resources and those bunkers, so that we can be safe and preserved during Jacob's trouble and endure to the end. You see, and they showed you that in the movie Leave the World Behind. At the end of the movie, when the daughter came across that house, and then as she was in the house, she discovered that that there was an underground bunker underneath that house. Okay, and he had all kinds of food and snacks stored up in the house for her to dwell safely within that environment in the movie, that chaotic environment. She was down there watching her little show or whatever. Well, hey, that's symbolic of the elect, us, the hopeful elect. Because when the time of Jacob's trouble come, all right, when many of us may have to be literal pilgrims in the earth, going to and fro, okay, to keep ourselves from any danger. Hey, the Lord's may guide some of us into particular abandoned houses or whatnot, okay, to find particular underground bunkers with food and resources stashed up in them, just for us. You see, the wealth of the sinner is laid up for the just. Okay, and let me get this as well. This is Proverbs chapter 10 and verse 2. It says, treasures of wickedness profit nothing, but righteousness delivereth from death. Okay, and what is righteousness? This truth, this gospel, this understanding, this ministry that we, the hopeful elect, have received via the Holy Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh, to do what? Believe in Yahweh Shema Shai, as well as believe in the names of the Heavenly Father and the Son, Yahweh Shema Shai, renew our minds, make our bodies living sacrifice, preaching His word, this gospel throughout the four corners of the earth. You know, making our calling and election sure. All right, offering up the right spiritual sacrifice while we're in this grace period. Okay, these are the things that's going to deliver us from death in these times to come. But it's, as it said, the treasures of wickedness profit nothing. And this word treasures, when you go into it, all right, Strong's H214 says awatazar, and it says treasure, storehouse, treasure, all right, for gold, silver, etc. And then it says store, supplies of food or drink. Okay, supplies of food or drink. And when you have an underground bunker, what do you primarily store in it? Food and drink. Okay, provision, even particular, medicines and first aid kit. All right, essential goods, right? And then a little bit further down, it goes into storehouse, magazine, treasury. Okay, and then it says magazine of weapons, figuratively of God's armory. Okay, magazine of weapons. All right, and a lot of these people that have these underground bunkers and whatnot, not only do they store food and water and essential goods inside of their bunkers, but they also store, weapons and ammunition within their bunkers as well. Okay, whether it be, pistols, shotguns, rifles, whatever, bow and arrows. Okay, they store magazines and weapons within their bunkers as well. But guess what? None of these things are even going to deliver them from the Lord's judgment. Okay. And then Strong's definition, it goes into a armory, cellar, garner, storehouse, treasure house. Okay. And what is a cellar? All right. A cellar. Okay. It goes into basement. And then in the Oxford Dictionary of English, it says a room below ground level in a house, often used for storing wine or coal. Like a bunker, basically. Okay? Like a bunker. All right? So as it says again, Proverbs 10 verse 2, treasures of wickedness profit nothing. Storehouses, bunkers, cellars to store food and drink and magazine and weapons. Okay, that's not going to profit in the day of the Lord's wrath. But, righteousness delivered from death, is the righteousness of the elect that's going to, deliver from death, when the Lord brings His judgment. Okay, because, the righteous, us, the hopeful elect, Lord will not be able to number, we're the ones that's marked, Lord will not be able to number to be exempt from death, to be exempt from judgment, pursuant to Ezekiel 9 and 4. You see? And then it continues to say in verse 3, Proverbs 10 verse 3, the Lord Yahweh will not suffer the soul of the righteous to famish, but He casteth away the substance of the wicked. You see that? The Lord Yahweh Shemashah is not going to suffer the souls of the righteous, the elect, to famish, which the word famish goes into hunger, to basically starve. Okay, and why is that? Because as we read in the 13th chapter in the 22nd verse of Proverbs, the wealth of the just is the wealth of the sinner is stored up for the just. Some of these, underground bunkers that these people are building, okay, the Lord's putting a spirit on them to build these things, ultimately for the elect, for the elect's sake. You see? So that what? So that we don't suffer famish, so that we don't suffer, hunger and thirst and, starvation, all right, and lack of provision when Jacob's trouble come, all right. And let's get this as well. Isaiah 26 and 20. Okay, because there's, no amount of carnal prepping that you can do to escape these end time events, Jacob's trouble and whatnot, and ultimately World War III. Okay, ultimately the only prepping, the only prepping that can prepare for Jacob's trouble in World War III is righteousness to Yahweh Shema Shai. Okay, repentance. Okay, converting. Calling on the name of the Lord, preaching His gospel. Making our calling and election sure. Okay, and that's only for the elect of the nation of Israel. You see, Lord will not be of that number. The elect are the true preppers on the earth. Okay, because what? We don't prep with carnal physical things. Okay, prepping up on food and drink and weapons and things like that. Now, although there's nothing wrong with having a little bit of extra, this, that, and the third, extra thing of rice or beans or snacks or whatever it may be when the time of trouble comes upon you. But ultimately, we, the hopeful elect, we're not going to put our trust on carnal things when Jacob's trouble come. We're not going to put our trust on how much food we have stocked up or drink we have stocked up, or putting our trust in weapons and things like that. Ultimately, we prep to Yahweh Shema Shai. We're going to put our trust in Yahweh Shema Shai in that day, as the scripture speaks about, the just shall live by faith. Okay, but Isaiah 26 verse 20, this is going to be the ultimate survival of nuclear destruction from World War III. Isaiah 26 verse 20, it says, "Come, my people, enter thou into thy chambers, and shut thy doors about thee. Hide thyself as it were for a little moment, until the indignation be overpassed." And what is the indignation that the Lord is talking about right here? The thermonuclear destruction of Babylon the Great. Okay, by way of nuclear missiles shot off during World War III. Okay, the Lord's elect, all right, are going to enter into the chambers. And what is the chambers talking about? The chariots. Okay, enter into the doors of the chariots. When Yahweh calls us up, the Lord will not be of that number. Okay, that's going to be the ultimate survival of nuclear destruction in World War III, being beamed up into the chariots of Yahweh Shema Shai. Okay, which is likened to chambers in this verse right here. Okay, and it says, verse 21, "For behold, the Lord Yahweh cometh out of his place to punish the inhabitants of the earth." Okay, and how is the Lord going to execute this? Through his right hand, Yahweh Shai. Okay, behold, the Lord Yahweh Shema Shai cometh out of his place. Okay, to punish the inhabitants of the earth for their iniquity. Okay, through what ultimately? Nuclear destruction. And it says, "The earth also shall disclose her blood, and shall no more cover her slain." Because what? That's all, speaking to how devastating the Lord's judgment is going to be in these end times, especially upon here Babylon the Great America. Okay, the Lord is going to make this place absolutely desolate and destroyed. As a matter of fact, let's see. Let's go to Isaiah 13. Isaiah 13 and verse 19, it says, "And Babylon," okay, was the Babylon that is speaking of in this chapter is talking about Babylon the Great. Okay, a future end time Babylon, which is America. Okay, and this verse right here is gonna prove that. Isaiah 13 verse 19, "And Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldees' excellency, shall be as when the Most High overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah." And how did the Most High overthrow ancient Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding cities? By raining down fire and brimstone from the heavens. Okay, and making it desolate, inhabitable. Okay, and so the fact that it's speaking of, how the Lord is going to overthrow Babylon the Great America as he overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah, that means what? The Lord is getting ready to rain down fire and brimstone from the heavens upon this place. All right, the fire and the brimstone is going to come in the form of what? ICBM nuclear missiles, hypersonic missiles. Okay, to make this place desolate and destroyed and uninhabitable, just like ancient Sodom and Gomorrah. Verse 20, "It shall never be inhabited, neither shall it be dwelt in from generation to generation. You see that? The Lord is going to destroy this place so bad to where it's going to be uninhabitable. Okay, shall never be dwelt in. All right, from generation to generation. It says, neither shall the Arabian pitch tent there, neither shall the shepherds make their fold there. All right. So yeah, then as it continues going down, it speaks about how the only thing that's going to inhabit America after the Lord destroys this place is particular desert creatures and unclean birds and desert birds and things like that. Unclean particular unclean animals. All right, for the purpose of what? Eating up and consuming all the dead bodies that's going to be left in this place after the smoke clears. You see? But pretty much the main point in this chapter though is that the Lord is going to make an absolute desolation and destruction upon Babylon the Great America. Okay? And just reading a prophecy like this, what underground bunker or can survive the judgment that the Lord's getting ready to bring upon this place. The Lord's getting ready to judge this place like he did ancient Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay? So there's nothing that, no underground bunker can do to protect anybody, from receiving his judgment. Okay? If you're not of the elect here in Babylon the Great America, you will not survive the judgment that the Lord's getting ready to bring upon this place by way of nuclear fire. Okay? So so I'm pretty much conclude the lesson with that. So Lord willing, this video is edifying, and until next time, shalom.